Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Today on Point of View, we're going to talk about the left. We're going to talk about its power and some of the things that it accomplishes, even when it does not hold political power and is not in the White House. Really, one of the things that the left does is it tries to revise history and reinterpret historical figures. So, for example, yesterday was Columbus Day. And Antifa, of course, the anti-fascist leftist group that's causing so much violence and anarchy across the nation, they called for defacement of Columbus statues all over the country yesterday. They called on various anarchist groups to do that. And, that was just sort of their way to celebrate. The city of Los Angeles, for instance, renamed Columbus Day. It's no longer Columbus Day. It's called Indigenous Peoples Day. And I found something kind of funny and tongue-in-cheek at the Resurgent website. This is by Jesse Kelly, and the piece is entitled, "Why Did Christopher Columbus Ruin America?" And Jesse Kelly writes, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's a little rhyme I just made up. Well, really, not really. We all know that rhyme. We learned that in elementary school. But Jesse Kelly says this is to help you remember the year Columbus destroyed America. He goes on in this little piece at Resurgent. He was born in one of those European countries that's not important enough to remember, like Italy. And he set out on an early path to destruction. Young Christopher, says Jesse Kelly, could be seen at an early age staring out at the ocean and dreaming about conquest and genocide. Who would have thought? Soon he would get his chance. He got himself some ships, and at no risk to himself, he set out across the ocean with murder on his mind. Upon discovering America, of course, he wasn't looking for America, as we all know. He was trying to go to the West Indies. But upon discovering America, he couldn't believe what he saw. It was a utopia very similar to what you saw in that movie Avatar, except none of the people were blue. There was commerce here and complete peace between all the tribes. They were just getting ready to construct a great North American highway system back in 1492. Also, they were going to discover the polio vaccine and establish the Peace Corps when Columbus just ruined it all. There was one language, an established border, and a plan to expand trade routes across the ocean until Columbus arrived and showed up on the scene. So Jesse Kelly says, don't celebrate this day. This is a day for you to sit in your air-conditioned house and tweet from your iPhone about how oppressed you are and about the evils of America's history. Or, just says Jesse, you can get on your knees and thank God you live in the wealthiest country in the world and you're comfortable enough to complain about things that happened 600 years ago. So this is tongue-in-cheek, but the left in this country is pulling out all the stops to transform this nation from its constitutional and historical roots. And one way, of course, is to attack our historical figures. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to bring on a guest. Her name is Kelly Kohlberg, and she is with the American Conservancy. She's done a lot of work mapping the left, trying to inform those of us who care about all the organizations that exist across the country, how they're funded, And there's even a little video at our website at pointofview.net. It's about 15 minutes long, and I highly recommend that you check it out. It's if you go there and you just look at our guests today, you'll see Kelly Kohlberg, and it's near her picture. And they are hoping that a lot of people will share this video because really, even though the quote-unquote right is in power in many states and in the White House in Washington, D.C., holding many offices, supposedly in control of the House and the Senate, we still have tremendous influence of the left in this country, and it's outside of government in lots of ways, and we'll discuss that. This video, though, kind of capsulizes it, and it helps you to share it because it's difficult, in a sense, to articulate some of the power that's there. So we'll do that. And then also later in the program, Liberty McArtor is going to join us. She's with The Stream, and she's going to tell us, well, she wrote an article, why she supports the Second Amendment even after Las Vegas. That's also posted at pointofview.net. We'll talk a little bit about gun laws, and we'll certainly want your input on that. And then Donald Trump, since the House and Senate were not able to pass a replace of Obamacare, Donald Trump is going to take some actions, and he's signaled this already, making some changes to Obamacare, sort of opening things up to the free market a little bit, even stripping some of the requirements for certain health insurance policies. And so, in a sense, I think it's possible that we'll have a whole different animal, even if the House and Senate don't do anything after Trump's through with this. We'll see. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll be covering that along the way. And then, another story out of California. There's a new law that's actually on October 6th. It went into effect. I think actually Jerry Brown signed it on October 6th. It's going into effect. And it provides jail time for people who are misusing gender pronouns. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the program. That's really part of the leftist agenda, redefining terms like male and female, for instance, like marriage, like hate. And so, that will be part of our discussion today. And then I just want to go to the story about sort of the feud between U.S. Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee and President Trump. Of course, there has been sort of a tweet storm between them. There have been interviews. There have been things said. And in a sense, there was one of the interviews was with the New York Times, where Bob Corker, who is retiring from the Senate, he's chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And in this interview with the New York Times, he says that basically Trump is on the path to World War III. Now, this senator he was in the running to be vice president. He was in the running to be Secretary of State. He wasn't talking about President Trump this way back then, but now he is. Apparently, President Trump has said that he refused to support Senator Corker in his reelection bid, and that's why he's retiring from the Senate. He's one of those moderate senators that are having trouble being reelected, so that very well could be true. But it's just very interesting. But Christopher Ruddy, who is chief executive of Newsmax and a supporter of Donald Trump, he says that Donald Trump never truly severs relationships. He has these fights with people, and yet he still sort of tries to work with them. So there's always a dialogue. This is probably not the end point, says Ruddy, in that relationship between Corker and Trump, but it certainly sounds like it right now. These things are fun to watch, but I think what's really more fun to watch is some of the things that Trump says that may actually improve our foreign policy. Remember, Corker's the one that gave us the Iran nuclear deal that Mr. Trump would now like to remove us from. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot on our plate today on Point of View. We hope you'll stick with us throughout the show. We certainly will involve you in the conversation and open the phones. But next up, we're going to talk about mapping the left with Kelly Kohlberg. During the break, go to pointofview.net and you'll find that video I was discussing. Stay with us.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A third of all young adults are single, broke, and living in their parents' home. That's how some are describing the latest results from the Pew Research Center study of the millennial generation. More young adults are now living with their parents than with a spouse or a partner. This is a tipping point for the first time in modern history. About 32% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 34 are living in their parents' home, compared with 31% who are married or living with a partner in their own household. The remaining 36% live alone, are single parents, or live in dorms or with other relatives. One researcher explained that this was a much different transition from previous generations. In the past, setting up new families was more typical than what we find today. In many ways, this shows the postponement of marriage. This is likely due to both lifestyle choices and economics. It's worth noting that some of these trends were taking place before the economic downturn 8 years ago. But economics is another obvious reason for more young people living at home. They face a difficult labor market and therefore are unable to live independently. That is why fewer and fewer of them are married or even living with someone. These economic realities are even worse for men without a college degree and for people of color. The highest percentage of men living with parents are Black and Hispanic men. The lowest percentage are men with college degrees. Wages for all men have stagnated over the last few decades, and the labor participation rate has dropped significantly. None of this is helping improve the housing market or other aspects of the economy. If you don't own a home, you aren't likely to be spending money on appliances, furniture, and other household items. All of this merely demonstrates that the image of a millennial living in his or her parents' home isn't just a stereotype, it's reality. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Based on the incredible true story and best-selling book from Paramount Pictures and PureFlix comes Same Kind of Different as Me, rated PG-13, in theaters October 20th.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and we've been talking a little bit about the left in the first segment. The left certainly works to influence politics. But even when they lose or don't control the White House or the state houses, they work for change in just so many areas across the nation. And one person who's trying to sort of pull this together and help us understand how powerful the left is Kelly Kullberg. And she's the founder of the Veritas Forum at Harvard and now many universities. She's also author of Finding God Beyond Harvard, The Quest for Veritas. And Kelly, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Penna.
Well, I already did sort of introduce this video that you have been showing, and basically others also, people that we really interview often on this program. For instance, Jim Garlow and Eric Metaxas have been recommending this video that sort of summarizes the power of the left. And I think at this point in our history, Kelly, it's important that people understand some of the organizations, some of the names we hear every day and some we never hear of, that are involved in really transforming this country, even though they're not in power in the White House.
Yeah, I agree with you. Jesus said to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, and he wants us to understand the, forces, kind of the people behind the curtain. So often we see the street theater, the optics on television, and I think if we could become more scrutinizing and ask some questions, who's paying for those uniforms and those bus tickets and those plane tickets and those signs, and why do the signs look the same around the world in different languages, and who's doing the branding, and on and on. I think as we become kind of wiser to in discerning what's really happening. And, you know, we'll see images of Ferguson and Baltimore and Dallas and police being shot, even Charlottesville, the Occupy movement, the Arab Spring, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, CARE, Southern Poverty Law Center, on, the Women's March, the Science March, and so forth. And our own friends being attacked by these forces. And I don't know about you, I always wish that news anchors were as smart as you are and would say, gee, you know, is all of this grassroots or is this kind of astroturf brought in? Who's paying for this and why? Who are these funny ministers showing up in little outfits all the time? And who pays their bills? And we would begin to see that there's a huge funding stream that are shaping what become our national narratives that help a certain side politically and in other ways as well.
Well, Kelly, I mean, one name that, you know, everybody that listens to this program knows is George Soros. And there's partially the answer to that question is who's funding all this. But there are other organizations too, aren't there?
Yes, there are. There's a handful, really very small number of major donors. There are lots of $10 gifts to these various groups. But really it's a group of globalist, they would say maybe post-American or anti-American, I would say, globalists who have a vested interest in a weak America and a weak church. That's the core of American strength. And so if one just as an accountant simply downloads the public IRS 990s of George Soros's Open Society Foundation, that's soros.org on the web, or go to GuideStar and Google Open Society 990s. They would see where about $1 billion a year goes. Also, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Tides Foundation, Carnegie of New York, the Gill Foundation, MacArthur, Arcus, and a few others, of course, the Clinton Foundation, the Hewlett and Kellogg Foundations. There's really only about 9 or 10 major multi-billion-dollar foundations that are funding hundreds and hundreds of activist groups. This is a new growth industry in America. It beats working in a coffee shop if you have $60,000 in debt and a degree that doesn't really get you very far occupationally. And so they're being asked to apply as community organizers, social justice workers. There's a website, hiring portal, organizersforamerica.org, that allows people to apply in any city and state and with medical benefits. So that's what Soros has created, a growth industry in anarchy and political activism that swings people and the public narratives to the Democrat Party that he essentially purchased through campaign finance reform. This is very dangerous. This is George Soros, who was the chairman of Ready for Hillary PAC. So he was using public street theater while subsidizing the media to cover it in order to win elections. And the most dangerous thing,
So, Kelly, this is a man who he works to win elections, but then, as a point I made at the beginning, they don't win, or perhaps, temporarily the right maybe gains control of certain offices, but they're still there in force, aren't they?
They're very much still there. We're talking about what's sometimes called the shadow party, or it's really a global deep state now with Soros's people around the world in many countries. Many countries are trying to get rid of the open society programs. Macedonia, Hungary, Poland, on and on. And so Soros took a long view of history, and he was going to weaken Judeo-Christian cultures, which gives his little globalist group of friends power over those cultures. And that's what's happening.
Let's talk about some of the ways in which this is done, because I think people, the topics that we cover here on Point of View hit on all the ways in which these groups try to influence the culture. For instance, through our educational system, through redefining truth, redefining terms. I mean, male, female, hate, through undermining marriage and family, and also this transgender movement now. I mean, I can go on, and we will during the rest of the program. But Kelly, it's everything that we see as believers that goes against our values. That's where this sort of web of the left is trying to take us, isn't it?
Yes. Again, we get caught up in the optics of, a march on Washington or Ferguson and so forth. But if we step back and look at what are the outcomes of this kind of thing over time, and exactly what you said, it's redefining language, biblical love, which is the highest love for human beings, and why we are speaking up on this and every other subject, because of love. And friends, always use the word love, because that's what we're contending for. Don't let them set the terms. You are not hateful. You love people. That's why we're contending. And then
they've certainly managed to turn that on its head, haven't they? I'm glad that you're emphasizing the word love, because really what we have to do is take the word hate, which they use and call us, and turn it around to help people understand that a lot of the ways we have to stand on principle is because of love.
Use those words, because of love. Because of love, I cannot be silent today. Do I want to publicly be talking about this subject?
Yeah.
Not really. But people are suffering. I think we should create a harm map that simply, asks corporations, why are you funding the SPLC and MoveOn.org and on and on and on, phony faith groups because they're creating harm when anything less than the gospel and the biblical wisdom for human flourishing advances in a pillar of culture, education, the arts, science, anything. People suffer. Something less than the goodness of God is going to take that place. And we as Christians need to be, Christian worldview people who can reason from the whole counsel of Scripture and explain why this is the most loving thing for human beings.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think one way of loving and spreading truth would be to go to pointofview.net and check out the video that we've placed there on our website today. It's about 15 minutes, and it's just a good summary of the left right now. And I think you'll find it very interesting. And those who made this video really want you to share it and spread it. And so, we're doing that here on Point of View today, and we're speaking with someone who's been digging deep into this, Kelly Kohlberg. We will do more of that right after this.
Sometimes I joke that I'll win the lottery when God blows the winning ticket across a parking lot to me. I don't buy tickets, so if he wants me to win, that's the way. Pretty silly, right? But a lot of us take a similar stance when it comes to the ills of our culture. We don't do anything. We simply hope things will change. I encourage you to get in the game and make things change. Join Truth Team 360 and be part of a work that changes lives and communities. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151.
From Paramount Pictures and PureFlix comes Same Kind of Different as Me. Ron and Debbie Hall have everything they could ever want, except for a loving marriage. But when Debbie befriends a homeless man, their lives begin to intersect, and they are all changed forever.
Amazing how far a little tender love and care can go.
Same Kind of Different as Me, based on the true story. In theaters October 20th, rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. More information is available at samekindofdifferentasmemovie.com.
Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And my guest is Kelly Kohlberg, and she's the founder of the Veritas Forum at Harvard, and now it's at many universities. We're talking about the left, and we're really digging in a little bit here. And Kelly, you know, the agenda of the progressives and the left is to weaken America, as you've said. And you've got all kinds of groups out there pushing various leftist causes. I mean, you can think about the LGBT causes like the Human Rights Campaign. You can think about climate groups, open borders, refugees, wealth redistribution, social justice groups. And one thing that was, in a sense, surprising, I think, to some people that's highlighted in the video that we've suggested people take a look at, and that is that there are a lot of so-called Christian groups out there pushing leftist causes, and some of the pastors have really, in a sense, I don't know if they actually come from the left or if they've been co-opted by the left, but the video talks about it in terms of renting a pastor or a Christian mascot type pastor. So explain this.
Sure. A couple things. One is that they're so effective because there are, and if you watch the video at American Evangelicals with an S, .com, AmericanEvangelicals.com, the single best tool I've ever seen to explain what's going on. 15 minutes, show it to your Bible studies, your families, your churches, your neighborhoods. It explains a lot. And why they're so effective, the key is that the highly organized and well-funded tiny minority of people overwhelms the unorganized majority. That means the rest of us just trying to live a good life, you know, and be good to our neighbors and families. And so they are very effective. One of the things that George Soros and friends realized when they lost the election with Al Gore and then John Kerry, there was a meeting and they were not happy, and they said, "Why are we losing?" And a fellow named Jim Wallace started to get involved, the head of Sojourners.
Yeah.
And Jim, Reverend Jim Wallace, has been a kind of a social justice, so-called community organizer for decades. And Soros began to fund Jim Wallace and Sojourners to give the far left what they call the faith narrative, or what internally on our video we call we have video of the New America Foundation, which is a Soros-related foundation, calling it our rent and evangelical model of social change. We have them saying that on the video at AmericanEvangelicals.com. So what they realized is that they would never break up the red states, the value voters, and win elections unless they started using Bible words very selectively. So they began running the optics of groups like Faith in Public Life. They're always dressed up ministers with outfits on. And Faithful America.
Who's the guy at Faithful America? Is there a pastor a famous pastor that heads that up?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay.
Sadly, some anti-Israel groups that claim to be pro-Israel, groups like Telos and J Street, groups that were doing faith for the takeover of the internet for Soros and the Ford Foundation. The group literally called Faithful Internet. Wow. You can't make this up. I was pulled in the 90s. My book, Finding God at Harvard, was doing well, and Veritas forums were taking off, and they picked younger leaders off. And so I was invited to rewrite a pro-life manifesto that basically would have made, caring about snail darts being pro-life, and it would have given the Democrats the pro-life narrative. And I never knew that it was political. Likewise, I was a stranger and you welcomed me, the evangelical immigration table. And we have friends in that. They didn't realize, or some did, but some didn't, in the last couple of years, that was begun by the National Immigration Forum. Who's that? Soros, Ford, Rockefeller, and others. They wanted to pass the Schumer-Rubio bill, the Gang of Eight immigration bill that would have meant amnesty for a lot of people and probably would have given Hillary Clinton the election. So, I mean, this is just, I'm learning this stuff the hard way. I had no idea. I had been pulled into the kind of climate change, global warming project by rewriting what it means to be pro-life. And so I had to kind of repent and say, I should have asked more questions. I didn't know who was paying our bills to go hiking in the Sierra Nevadas. They offer perks, if not money. They didn't offer me money, but would I go to this conference and that? So people get pulled in, and we just have to wise up. But really, Jim Wallace is denied taking the Soros money when directly asked by Marvin Alasky and others. He called Alasky a liar in World Magazine. And then the grants disappeared off of Soros.org to Sojourners. This is 2010. And then someone had printed the grants, sent them to journalists, and it went viral. Why is Jim Wallace Sojourners denying the Soros money? Wallace reappeared a week later and said, I forgot. And so, forgot the money of one of the 20 richest men in the world. And so we've really got to wake up to money that is being dangled, and they call it dripping. It's being dripped into whether it's the Open Border Amnesty Project, or global warming, or, on and on.
Yeah.
And that pastors and leaders have to say no and understand the agenda behind the money to give the faith narrative to a radical political agenda.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to open the phones 800-351-1212 if you'd like to ask Kelly a question. Kelly, can you stay with us up until the top of the hour?
Sure.
Good, because I think we need that and a lot more. But we're so glad Kelly's with us to help us unpack some of this. And I think it's very disturbing to think about these evangelical mascots, these pastors, in a sense being used as a front, but also the money is drawing them for their various causes. I do want to ask you, Kelly, about the corporate pressure, the pressure that the left puts on corporations to toe the line with regard to the LGBT agenda. I mean, this is huge. It's affected elections. It affects the policies of companies. It affects people who own businesses themselves. And this is part of sort of changing the culture and transforming it, isn't it?
Yes, it is. They create a rating system, and if corporations haven't given financially the way these groups like or voted on something, then it's used as a weapon against them. And so the companies would rather avoid that altogether, so they begin caving into the direction. It's kind of it's almost like a kind of blackmail of threatening or punishment. And there aren't very many brave, the Green family stood up to this, and some amazing other people have stood up to it.
Lobby.
And said, no, we love people. We're not any of the things you're saying. In fact, you're the ones doing harm. So why don't Christians develop a different rating system and ask corporations, well, why are you giving to groups that do harm to people by incentivizing, sexually transmitted disease behavior, or incentivizing abortion, or incentivizing, fill in the blank, and to say let's who can play this game. And so let's incentivize and thank and reward actual love for human beings.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to join our conversation, the number is 800-351-1212. Also, If you'd like to know more about our guest, Kelly Kullberg, go to pointofview.net. You'll see her picture there and the video that we've been discussing and that we're really recommending as a way to sort of help synthesize and make sense of the left and the broad reach and the web of all the leftist organizations. You know, there are a few funders and there are some big prominent organizations, but I'm going to ask Kelly after the break about the small organizations. Some of these are just a website. Some are just a telephone and telephone number. Maybe just one or two people doing the work, making it sound like it's a more powerful group. And then these funds flow in from these powerful organizations. The left is not as big as the right, but it's very well organized. Stay with us, and we will continue our conversation right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. You probably have a similar opinion about pay raises that Sheldon Gelman and Gene Lifter did. They're symbolic. Do a good job and an increase in pay suggests that the company is grateful for the effort. Gelman and Lifter were law professors at Cleveland Marshall College of Law. Gelman organized his fellow law professors into a union with the support of Lifter, his wife, and over the objections of management. The next spring, the faculty, Gelman included, received a pay raise, but Gelman lost some committee appointments, and soon after, Lifter was terminated altogether. One wouldn't think much of it, but the dollar amount on the pay increase caught everyone's attention. It was too intriguing to be coincidental. The newly organized union faculty received a raise of $666. Taken alongside Gelman's loss of committee influence and Lifter's termination, the numerals seemed to send a message. Gelman and Lifter sued, alleging retaliation against a protected First Amendment freedom, but the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit wasn't buying it. There were simple explanations for the pay raise amounting to apocalyptic numbers, and while Gelman's union organizing was certainly protected by the First Amendment, there were no facts present to suggest the law school retaliated against him for doing so. The lesson here is clear. If your paycheck shows the supposed mark of the beast, don't assume your employer violated the First Amendment. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And Penna Dexter, my guest Kelly Kullberg, is doing the hard work of assessing the left, and she also is the founder of the Veritas Forum at Harvard, and it's in like 200 universities across the country. But we are discussing the left, and let me just kind of make a list on the areas in which the left is trying to transform America. I started the list, but let's just go back. Educational content. Certainly this transgender movement, I mean, really redefining what it is to be male and female. Undermining marriage and the family. Promoting abortion and now euthanasia. Drug legalization efforts. Dividing us by race and identity. That's certainly in the news now. rewriting history. I mean, Columbus Day yesterday, we talked about that earlier in the program, weakening the police and authority, redistributing wealth and changing the economy, redefining words like hate, like male, like female, really redefining the word gospel using these rent-a-pastors, even the flow of Islamic refugees, open borders, documenting the undocumented so that they can vote. I mean, these are just some of the ways in which the left is working, and that's why there's this web of organizations. And Kelly, talk a little bit about the organizations, because some of them are just basically shells, aren't they?
Well, I wish they were just shells, but really a lot of these did start as a website. MoveOn.org was a website. It's now a huge organization. So they really used the internet to break out quickly. And they became excellent at raising money. So all of these, most of the organizations are very well funded. Groups. And what's so interesting, Penna, is that what Soros and friends did to swing elections to get Barack Obama, for example, and others elected, and many of their policies through, was to incentivize collaboration. I'll say that again. To financially incentivize collaboration, not competition, not siloed groups, but these groups were paid to swarm on states and issues. States like Colorado. There's a book called Blueprint, how the group swarmed on Colorado together. And
different groups that represent different issues, correct?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. They're funded to work together. They're funded for victory, for outcomes, for wins. And conservatives don't act that way. We like each other so much, but we don't work together very well. And it's really a shame because we're supposed to be advancing the gospel and the kingdom of God as the body of Christ. And it's almost like this other side is mocking us because we don't do that in a kind of unified way. I don't mean community organized, but I mean really putting our brains in gear together and really having each other's backs and promoting one another. It's just Trinitarian theology, really. And so the left is paid to swarm on, whether it's Mike Pence when he was the governor of Indiana, he was swarmed on, Michelle Bachmann, Tom DeLay, on and on.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah Palin. I mean, they isolate, target, and swarm on people and destroy them. And so that's political warfare, and that's what they do. So these groups, there are hundreds and hundreds of them. And if you see, we'll go to AmericanEvangelicals.com. About 2 or 3 minutes into that 15-minute video, there's a scrolling list of these organizations, and it is overwhelming how many there are.
It is.
It's, Human Rights Campaign, the ACLU, La Raza, Evangelical Immigration Table, Sojourners, Faith in Public Life, on and on and on. I mean, hundreds and hundreds. And a lot of the names sound nice. Center for American Progress, the American this, the constitutional that. Don't believe the words. And we need to take our words back, like progress, like love, like justice, and really begin to assert.
Yeah, the left has co-opted a lot of those words, haven't they?
Let's take them back where they belong and, calmly, in a civilized way, reason for the meanings, the actual meanings of those words. But your viewers, listeners will see hundreds of those organizations scroll by. A lot of them are funded by Soros, Ford, Rockefeller foundations, and these foundations have really been infiltrated by far left people over the years, and so they have access to many billions of dollars to create a growth industry.
All right, so you can see the video. Well, you can just click to pointofview.net and click through to the video, or just go to AmericanEvangelicals.org. Kelly Kullberg is my guest. We're taking calls. Let's go now to the state of Missouri. Debbie is there listening in on KTTK. Hi, Debbie.
Hey, how are you?
Great. Thanks for calling.
Okay, so I have read a lot of Dinesh D'Souza's book, and he basically, where he got his information was killer, and to know that you need to get his books. But basically, the Democrats started slavery, so if anybody wants to be mad at a group, we ought to start there. But the reason that I'm calling is that in one of his books, he explains how back in the day when Hillary Clinton was young, like in her 20s, she got kicked off of some committee that she belonged to for ethical violation. And at that point, he's like, hey, maybe I need to formulate her. So he got with her, and he's been working with her since she was in her 20s.
Who has?
I mean, this agenda with Soros started.
Okay, let me let Kelly pick up on that. Kelly, do you have any comments on this?
Well, again, thank you for the caller. Raises a really interesting point and important, and that is that when we see a public figure, don't think that's all you're seeing. Look at the history and the alliances of that figure. Americans should be allowed to know as much as possible about anyone, Republican or Democrat, running for an office. And in the video, I keep mentioning, there's an actual screenshot of a letter Hillary Rodham wrote to Saul Alinsky, who is the father of community organizing, leftist socialist community organizing. And there's a photograph of it. So you're right, there's a long history with the socialist organizing. Barack Obama was the head of ACORN, that's Association of Community Organizing for Reform Now. And
there's so much here, isn't there? It's just an unbelievable web.
Yeah, and so I just thank the caller because we need to really know more and discern more about the agendas behind these people and the money behind these people. George Soros has known the Clintons for decades. That is true.
Kelly, I just have to say thank you so much for giving us so much time today. We've got a whole bank of callers that wanted to talk with you. So I know and I hope that you will join us again soon because this is we've barely scratched the surface here. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, and I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, I do too. This is, it's really complex, and in a sense, I think a good way to sort of get your arms around this here is to go to pointofview.net and check out the video that Kelly was talking about. I think you'll learn a lot there. We will try very soon to have her back so that we can begin to unpack some of this. I think that we can do a lot of good if we understand the left. And that's what we're trying to do here on Point of View. Next up, we're going to talk with Liberty McArtor, and we're going to sort of talk about the aftermath of Las Vegas. Stay with us for that.
At dinner recently, I was struck by the couple in front of me. They were allegedly spending a night out together, but the only time they communicated in a half hour was one time when the man showed what was on his phone to the woman, and then back to their own screens. We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You'll find us online with your phone, your tablet, your laptop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues. You can also follow our new YouTube video series, Uncensored. Stay informed. Follow us on Twitter at Point of View RTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Again, at Point of View RTS. We'd love you to retweet us, to share our Facebook posts, but please don't do it when you're out with your family or someone you love. We can wait. We're online 24 hours a day. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. It's been 9 or 10 days since the massacre in Las Vegas, and the Wall Street Journal, very quickly after that shooting, came out with a editorial, The Gun Control Mirage, and they say, since our friends on the left have decided to make this a debate over gun control, someone has to explain why their familiar solutions won't stop mass shootings. They say the impulse to do something after an event of such horror is understandable, and progressives believe that every human problem can be solved with a policy tweak. A ban here, a background check there, and voila, no more mass shootings. But American life and human depravity don't always bend to government dictates. And someone who agrees with that sentiment and sort of embellishes it is my next guest. Her name is Liberty McArtor, and she is a staff writer for The Stream, which we love here at Point of View. She holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from Patrick Henry College. She also worked in D.C. as a radio producer for WMAL's Weekend Talk Show, and she interned at First Liberty Institute, the home of our own Kelly Shackelford, and many other attorneys there participate in Point of View. And so we're so glad to have Liberty. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Penna. It's so great to be here.
Tell me how you got your name.
Well, I think my parents just liked it. People often ask, are you named after the Statue of Liberty? But they really just like the name and the meaning of freedom in Christ. And so, yeah.
Well, it seems like you're living up to your name. And Liberty, you've written a piece for The Stream, which we've posted at pointofview.net. And it's why I still support the Second Amendment even after Las Vegas. So thanks for writing it, first of all. And, you know, you say that as a young 20-something woman from Texas, you say that the left's cry for gun control is not going to solve our shooting spree problem.
Right. And I think, you know, the quote from the Wall Street Journal that you just shared with us exemplifies that so perfectly, because it really doesn't matter what tools a person uses. If they have that evil in their heart, which we all do, and if they're determined to carry out an evil act, they will find a way to do it. All you need to do is look over in Europe in the past year. The number of mass stabbings that we've seen and car attacks that we've seen prove that an evil person will find a way to commit murder and commit those evil acts. And in reality, the gun control measures being pushed by the left would just make it harder for law-abiding citizens like me to be able to carry a gun and defend myself. And so it puts more people at risk. And so that's why we have to keep pushing back with these facts and say, look, what happened in Las Vegas is tragic. We want to stop these mass shootings, but the typical gun control measures that the left often pushes are just not the answer.
Yeah, you know, we have some very smart people who use the statistics to tell us just what you're just saying. For instance, John Lott, his book has been a classic, More Guns, Less Crime. But the left just doesn't seem to get it, do they?
They don't. And, you know, one of the things that is interesting is there was an article in the Washington Post, which I really appreciated, and a researcher went through and said, I used to be for gun control, but I looked at the numbers and realized that gun control is not going to solve the problem. And we look at these mass shootings, and they're the ones that grab our attention in the headlines, and they are so horrific. But the people that are most affected by gun violence in the United States are people who commit suicide, young men that often fall victim to homicide related to gang violence, and women who are victimized by domestic abusers. Those are the people who suffer the most from gun violence in America. And so you can say, most of the people who are in state prisons for gun-related crimes actually got their guns illegally. So that also shows you that a criminal is not going to follow gun laws. So if you make it harder for these other people to get guns, then it's just going to make them, not able to defend themselves, whereas criminals are going to find a way to get a gun anyway on the black market, through the drug dealers, etc.
You mentioned in your article one of the musicians, Caleb Keeter, lead guitarist for the Josh Abbott Band. Forgive me if I'm not familiar with all these groups, but just tell our audience and our listeners, his story. What were his thoughts on this?
Well, I really sympathize with Keeter just because I can't imagine what he went through. He was there in Las Vegas at the festival when the shooting happened, and he posted on Twitter afterwards saying he had always supported the Second Amendment, but now he didn't because several of his band members were actually licensed to carry handguns. They had legal guns in their tour bus, but he said they were useless. We couldn't use them because we were afraid the police might shoot us, thinking we were the shooters, and they couldn't stop Stephen Paddock, who was shooting from the hotel. And I actually agree with Keeter there. They could not have stopped that mass shooting. For one, Paddock was 32 stories above them. He had over 20 weapons in his hotel room. He had modified a lot of them to replicate automatic fire. So there's nothing you can do with a licensed handgun at that point. But that just goes back to my point that most gun violence in America is not mass shootings where the shooter is 32 stories above you. Most of it comes when a woman is walking to her car at night and someone approaches her with a knife and she's able to stop them because she has a handgun in her purse. And that's a real story that I linked to in my article. Or a woman in a restaurant. And this is a true story that happened in Texas. It actually led to Texas laws allowing people to carry legally. A man came into a Libby's restaurant and started shooting, and she wasn't allowed to carry her handgun, so she wasn't able to stop him, even though he was only a few feet away, and he killed dozens of people. So again, those are when you come face to face with someone that is committing a crime, that's where you're most likely to encounter gun violence, and that's when you need to be able to defend yourself. Now, the mass shootings, we should look at those and say, okay, what laws allowed this to happen? How can we stop mass shooters from doing this again in the future? But just, more background checks, more restrictions on people buying handguns, that's not going to fix it.
I noticed today that one of the chief gun controllers in the United States Congress, actually Dianne Feinstein, senator from the state of California, she's 84 years old, and she proposed some more gun control after this. The left never misses an opportunity to try to go after the Second Amendment when we have one of these horrible shootings. But she is actually running for re-election, so we may see her in the Senate until she's 90 years old. And she actually is very well preserved, I think, for 84. But for our side, and for those of us who support common sense gun laws where people can protect themselves and that also adhere to the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it's probably not a good thing. Although whoever replaced her there in that state would probably be thinking pretty much like she does. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue our conversation about guns with Liberty McArtor. She's going to stick with us for the next segment, and we'd love to hear from you. If you've got a question or a comment on this issue, the number is 800-351-1212. I also want to send you to pointofview.net because we've been talking about a video today about the left, and it's called Formula for Killing America. You can link through our website to go and check it out. It's 15 minutes, and it's really a guide for Americans, sort of summarizing the left, its funding, and its organizations. So go there during the break and certainly take advantage of the donate button. We are a listener-supported ministry. We depend on the gifts of listeners. And if you'd like to join us, again, our call-in line, 800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A third of all young adults are single, broke, and living in their parents' home. That's how some are describing the latest results from the Pew Research Center study of the millennial generation. More young adults are now living with their parents than with a spouse or a partner. This is a tipping point for the first time in modern history. About 32% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 34 are living in their parents' home, compared with 31% who are married or living with a partner in their own household. The remaining 36% live alone, are single parents, or live in dorms or with other relatives. One researcher explained that this was a much different transition from previous generations. In the past, setting up new families was more typical than what we find today. In many ways, this shows the postponement of marriage. This is likely due to both lifestyle choices and economics. It's worth noting that some of these trends were taking place before the economic downturn 8 years ago. But economics is another obvious reason for more young people living at home. They face a difficult labor market and therefore are unable to live independently. That is why fewer and fewer of them are married or even living with someone. These economic realities are even worse for men without a college degree and for people of color. The highest percentage of men living with parents are Black and Hispanic men. The lowest percentage are men with college degrees. Wages for all men have stagnated over the last few decades, and the labor participation rate has dropped significantly. None of this is helping improve the housing market or other aspects of the economy. If you don't own a home, you aren't likely to be spending money on appliances, furniture, and other household items. All of this merely demonstrates that the image of a millennial living in his or her parents' home isn't just a stereotype, it's reality. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Based on the incredible true story and best-selling book from Paramount Pictures and Pureflix comes Same Kind of Different as Me, rated PG-13, in theaters October 20th.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. My guest is Liberty McArtor, and she writes for The Stream, and she wrote a very common-sense article that talks about how she still supports the Second Amendment, even after Las Vegas, and she makes a very good case for it. And Liberty, can you talk a little bit about automatic weapons and semi-automatic weapons? Because it looks like the one fix that they're talking about that may actually get passed is to ban these things called bump stocks. Can you kind of explain that issue to our listeners?
Sure. Well, automatic weapons have actually been banned in the United States since the 80s. And so if you can jump through a bunch of legal hoops and go through months-long processes to get machine guns, et cetera, that were made before a certain date, but you can't go out and buy new machine guns or automatic weapons. And automatic just means you pull the trigger once and rounds, bullets continuously come out. So what this man, Stephen Paddock, did in Las Vegas is he bought an accessory called a bump stock. And what that does is it basically takes a semi-automatic rifle, which is one bullet per trigger pull, and makes it to where it fires continuously, almost just like an automatic gun, about 300 to 400 rounds per minute. And so, you know, it's technically still a semi-automatic, but because of the practicality of what happens whenever you apply that accessory, it makes it very similar to automatic fire. And so the White House and several Republican lawmakers have even said, let's look at restricting these bump stocks because it basically allows you to circumvent the law that banned automatic weapons several years ago. And the NRA has actually come out after Las Vegas and supported restrictions on bump stocks as well.
What do you think about it? Because in a sense, I mean, should we just not give in to the gun lobby or the gun control lobby at all, or is this a common sense law?
This is actually bump stock weren't something I thought about that much before the shooting. My husband and I own semi-automatic rifles because we love shooting sports. And so I think I would need to do a little more research before I come up with a very firm opinion. But my initial reaction is, yes, let's consider this. Let's look at restrictions on the bump stocks just because our existing law does ban automatic weapons. And so since this basically takes a semi-automatic weapon and turns it into an automatic weapon, then I would say that's okay to say, all right, let's look at it. Let's see if it would be helpful to go ahead and put more restrictions on these particular accessories, because whenever you're having somebody just pull the trigger and then rounds continuously come out hundreds per minute, that can just cause a lot more damage than a regular pull of the one bullet per trigger.
Okay, let's go to the phones. We've got lots of people calling in to talk to you, Liberty. Gregory is in Georgia, listening in on GNN. Hi, Gregory.
Yeah, how you doing?
Great, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to commend her for allowing herself to express herself, because I really agree with what she's saying. Because we got to realize that, what we're dealing with in this world, even though that we're trying, I have no condemnation against the Second Amendment, but at the same time, we're dealing with evil people that have no thoughts of goodness. And we got to realize that, Jesus said that people will love darkness more than light. And I think that we have to realize that, people with money, without conscience, is going to get guns, and you can't stop it. And it's just that the evil that we're facing in this democracy now, that's in this world, that's taking us to the end times, that what the Bible is fulfilling itself for what's going to happen. And, it took me back to Genesis when Nimrod, the God, began to make guns himself. But that's what brought forth sin. After the flood, sin took place, and people were learning to realize that the imagination of the heart is evil from the beginning. And no matter how good we are as Christians, people don't get guns that don't think like we do.
Yeah, we have to deal with the reality, don't we, of evil. And Liberty, I think he makes a good point. Well, first of all, guns don't shoot themselves, and guns aren't evil. In fact, they can be used to protect people. And you've made so many good points about how or you can protect yourself, too, or your family. So we don't disarm ourselves unilaterally just because some people use guns for evil, correct?
Right, and I think you made a really good point as well, just that, we do have evil in our hearts no matter what, and I think a lot of, we can look at the people who are most affected by gun violence in the United States, the people who are committing suicide or getting involved in gangs or become domestic abusers at home, and say, okay, there's a root issue there, and we're going to need a different response for each of those groups, but how can we target those groups and try to help them before they fall prey to gun violence or before they become perpetrators? And the evil will always exist, but why can't we look at the people who are committing these crimes and see if we can help them before they get to that step of committing the crime?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I look at this shooter, Stephen Paddock, and I wish someone could have, he didn't really show that many signs that he was capable of this. But we are, as he said and as you said, I mean, we all have evil in our hearts, and something clicked there. Sort of curious to see what is discovered in the future. But let's go back to the phones. James is in Texas. James, you are on Point of View. Thanks for calling.
Hi, how are you all today?
Great.
Oh, good. Well, I just have, just a simple comment, because this has been even a debate with our family, not so much a bad debate, but basically with our family, because we do believe in being able to protect yourselves, having your handgun concealed, unconcealed, basically that's your license to carry. But, like what we've been discussing, in our household, because we are a Christian household, we believe in, being able to take care of yourself. But, our big concern is that, why do you feel you have to carry rifles, elephant guns, ostrich guns, those types of things? Because, we've been kind of looking into this as well, and what we're looking at what they're trying to do with the gun control, I don't think what they're trying to do is totally disarm us. Now, like I said, this is just from where our family stands because, we've talked about this. Because, one, I work in the school system, so when you see stuff like Columbine and Sandy Hook, that's really bad when you think somebody will come into a school. The latest college shooting could have happened. I don't know if you all know about the recent one that just happened here in Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah, Texas Tech.
Yeah. And so now, like where I am, I'm clear across on the other side of the state here in El Paso, where we are the number one. We never ranked below the number 3 safest city in the United States. And
okay, what do you attribute that to? What do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute it to that we have a very, very, very good law enforcement here in El Paso PD, and just them trying to, how can I say, watch out for us and trying to, they kind of wrangle as many of those illegal guns out of there as possible, and then they try to patrol neighborhoods that are would be crime-ridden and everything like that. And I understand what the lady had said before too, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your name earlier. I just wanted to get the comment in. Yeah, thank you, Miss Liberty. Where it's true, most of the time when you do see stuff like that happen in Vegas, or that happen in San Diego with the people with these guns, we really don't know what they're thinking. And I think the gentleman just said too, a lot of us, well, we all have evil in our hearts, and the intentions, it's just really bad there. But
hey, James, I'm going to have to interrupt you because I think you're in traffic or something, and it's just hard to understand a lot of it. So I think we got the gist, but thanks for calling in. We appreciate it.
Hey, thank you very much. Like I said, basically, we're just saying that I don't think the gun control laws are trying to disarm us. I think they're just trying to protect us and try to get some of the bad stuff out of there.
Yeah.
But thank you all. You'll have a blessed and wonderful day.
Liberty, just comment on background checks because, background checks certainly make sense, but for instance, Stephen Paddock passed it, didn't he?
He did. He did not have a criminal record, and so there would be no indication that he would do something like this. And that, there are going to be people who fall through the cracks like that, but I think, you at that point, the law has to be objective and look at statistics and say, okay, is this person, based on their record, likely to commit a crime in the future? Another thing is that a lot of times background checks are already required whenever you buy a gun from a licensed dealer. In fact, if anyone wants to look up more about the existing background check laws, just Google NRA background checks. And that's what I did. And so you see that, in private sales, sometimes there's not background checks, but whenever you go to a gun store, you're going to have a background check. And so, again, people like Stephen Paddock, he passed them and something snapped. We don't know what happened. And that's very unfortunate. But, the vast majority of people who are getting guns legally have a clear background anyway.
Liberty, thank you so much for writing the article. It makes a lot of common sense. We appreciate your speaking out on this issue and also joining us here at Point of View.
That's been so great. Thank you.
We need to have her back, ladies and gentlemen. She makes a lot of common sense. And actually, she's here in Dallas. So perhaps she could come in someday and we could do a show with her. Ladies and gentlemen, next up, we are going to talk about this new law that the governor of California has signed. They can now jail people there for misusing gender pronouns. What about that? We'll talk about it right after this.
In an age of fake news, getting good information is vital. Point of View works to bring you that each and every day. But as Diane in Arkansas illustrates, passing that information along, educating others, is something you can help with. Diane is a college professor. She influences the next generation, and she wrote, "Thank you for your informative letter. I used some of your quotes when I was teaching the Declaration of Independence in my literature class." Diane, like so many, hopefully like you, is taking what she received from Point of View in letters, online, through our app, on the air, and rebuilding truth in this post-truth culture. All of that takes a team. Join the Truth Team at Point of View. Find out how you can help at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or sign up online at pointofview.net/team. Show your commitment. Make a difference today, right now. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. We have been talking about the reactions to the Las Vegas massacre, which from the left have been beef up gun control. And but some of the facts are elusive, and people don't really realize that since peaking in the 1990s, gun homicide has actually declined in half nationwide. And it's the number of guns that are held by Americans has grown during that period by 80 million. So studies show that people think that gun violence is much higher than it really is. We are taking calls on this issue. Let's go to Bob in the state of Maine. Hi, Bob. Thanks for calling.
Hi, thanks. I just caught the tail end of the discussion and it is very intelligent. But what kind of strikes me is they want to make a law to stop people that are going to break the law from doing things that are against the law.
Absolutely. That's a good way of putting it, Bob.
That's about all I got to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And, it's just, we talked about unilateral disarmament, and really the good guys need to be able to protect against the bad guys. The bad guys are not going to obey the laws against guns. And so to say that, people would not be allowed to protect themselves it's actually, it's just egregious. Chicago, for instance, is a place where guns are as illegal as is possible under the Second Amendment. And yet that city just passed its 500th homicide this year, about a month ago. Many weekends, the death toll is in the double digits there. They have Las Vegas-style numbers, massacred every 3 weeks. So, right there is one of your arguments. The left's rhetoric is disingenuous, and especially when it's coming from Hollywood, because Hollywood makes millions of dollars from gun violence when you really think about it. So, if someone like Dianne Feinstein, who is on the left, and the left really does believe that our rights come from government, not God or nature, I guess you can see why they believe that these rights need to be periodically updated. And that's what they're trying to do here. So let's continue on this note. We'll add a couple topics to the discussion here in this last half hour, but Mike is listening in at KNEO in Missouri. Mike, thanks for calling.
Oh,
what are your thoughts here?
Well, my thoughts are, of course, I'm definitely, though I have a couple of guns, but I'm not going to go out and shoot anybody. But a lot of times I think we're,
Well, what's your rationale and reasoning for having guns?
Just for target and
for fun, for sport.
And one of them is, I guess, if somebody's tried to harm my family and broke into my home, yeah, I could use it.
Yeah.
But normally I wouldn't shoot a gun. I don't even like to hunt. And I grew up on a farm that everybody hunted, and it wasn't really one of the things I wanted to do. But, I think that with the, of course, these guys always come after more gun control and stuff like that. You can't legislate morality. First of all, you're not supposed to kill people, at least on purpose. And second of all, just like when it was illegal to get an abortion, people still got them. Marijuana in most states is still illegal, but if you want some, you can get it probably within 30 minutes. You're not going to ever stop all that stuff. And there's some kook out there with a gun. The things that you could control would be, okay, if I go into your store and I buy 21 assault rifles, I'm not going deer hunting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There should be.
There are signs when there's a big massacre sometimes about to be committed, or that would signal terrorism to me.
Right. The accountability there, I think you would say, why would you be buying this many of this same gun? And that's why I still feel like, they're missing the boat somewhere. Somebody had to help him. I think it was bought by several people. He may have did the act, but somebody helped him. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I know a lot of us
so-
are scratching our heads. I mean, I think they're looking at it, and I think we're going to probably hear more. It is a puzzle, and it's just so sad. But gun control and restricting the rights to people's rights to own guns is not the answer.
No,
we wouldn't stop this.
And I don't need an assault rifle, and I have deer. I have 20 or 30 a day in my yard, and I feed them. But if I was hungry, I had no way I would kill one to survive.
But there's no romance for hunting for you.
Excuse me?
There's really no romance for you for hunting. That's not one of the things that you love. Like
no,
a lot of folks.
And the only reason this with my children, my family, then I could probably use a gun on somebody. But they'd have to provoke it. It wouldn't be something I would go out and just do, out off the top of my head. And I wouldn't plan out something like Vegas. So this was too well planned for somebody that was just a nut, total nut. I think he had to have a lot of other acorns with him, helping him out.
Well, I think hopefully we're going to find out more. But thank you so much for calling in, Mike. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there's another story that I teased that I want to tell you and talk about a little bit here. As of a few days ago, California can now start jailing people that refuse to use the preferred gender pronouns of nursing home residents. Jerry Brown, the governor of California, signed the bill last week. And this bill is limited to nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. And it mandates that those who willfully and repeatedly refuse to use a transgender resident's preferred name or pronouns can actually be slapped with a $1,000 fine or up to a year in prison. So, I mean, in a sense, I'm thinking about my 90-year-old father and thinking, wow, what a hard concept for someone in their 90s or 80s to even grasp that, you've got to use the right pronouns. And, they're using plural pronouns sometimes. Transgenders use them for themselves. They'll call themselves they. So that's confusing. But in California, perhaps it makes sense. And here's the rationale behind it. The state senator that introduced this bill, his name is Scott Wayner of San Francisco. And he says that our LGBT seniors built the modern LGBT community and led the fight for so many of the rights our community takes for granted today. It is our duty to make sure they can age with the dignity and respect they deserve. So someone has been in this community for a long time, and now they're in the nursing home. They should be able to be called by the pronoun that they choose, according to this state senator, and now according to the law in California. If you'd like to comment on that, give us a call, 800-351-1212. We've actually put an article on our website out of Fox News about it, and it's kind of interesting and almost funny, but not really. And I think one of the reasons it's not funny is, yes, this is limited to nursing homes, but the same agenda is also taking hold in public schools in various places across the country. In California, for instance, let's just start there, where a lot of this stuff starts. And, I'm speaking of my home state where I grew up, met my husband, married, and went to college and everything else. My family's still there. So I'm a proud Texan now. A public charter school in California, and this comes from, let's see, what am I reading from? I think it's the Washington Post, actually. But I can't tell where it's. Oh, it's Fox News. A public charter school in California has defended its decision to send a first-grade student to the principal's office for not referring to her biological male transgender classmate by the classmate's preferred pronoun. You may have heard of this story. It's called, the school is called Rockland Academy. And basically the law requires that students in California be called by the preferred gender. So they're enforcing that law at Rockland Academy, even with 5- and 6-year-olds. And so in practical terms, this means Rockland Academy is required by the law, this is what the administrators say, to call students by their preferred gender. They say that the school has a legal responsibility to prevent or stop harassment of protected classes. Of course, they're assuming here that 5 and 6-year-olds are capable of making that kind of decision. And that's what's so irresponsible, I think, on the part of parents and educators to allow this nonsense to go on. But that is what's going on. This student at Rockland Academy, student A, began wearing girls' clothing and asking to be called by a female. When another student wouldn't do it, she actually got in trouble. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I can cite some other states and schools where this kind of thing is going on, but we'd like to hear from you. 800-351-1212, and we'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. You probably have a similar opinion about pay raises that Sheldon Gelman and Gene Lifter did. They're symbolic. Do a good job, and an increase in pay suggests that the company is grateful for the effort. Gelman and Lifter were law professors at Cleveland Marshall College of Law. Gelman organized his fellow law professors into a union with the support of Lifter, his wife, and over the objections of management. The next spring, the faculty, Gelman included, received a pay raise, but Gelman lost some committee appointments, and soon after, Lifter was terminated altogether. One wouldn't think much of it, but the dollar amount on the pay increase caught everyone's attention. It was too intriguing to be coincidental. The newly organized union faculty received a raise of $666. Taken alongside Gelman's loss of committee influence and Lifter's termination, the numerals seemed to send a message. Gelman and Lifter sued, alleging retaliation against a protected First Amendment freedom, but the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit wasn't buying it. There were simple explanations for the pay raise amounting to apocalyptic numbers, and while Gelman's union organizing was certainly protected by the First Amendment, there were no facts present to suggest the law school retaliated against him for doing so. The lesson here is clear. If your paycheck shows the supposed mark of the beast, don't assume your employer violated the First Amendment. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
There's a little bit more content to this story about the first grader at Rockland Academy. It's a charter school in California. She accidentally, and this is sort of new terminology to a lot of us, but she misgendered a transgender classmate in what's being called a pronoun mishap. And this occurred again at Rockland Academy. Todd Starnes of Fox wrote about it. And, of course, the school has been, never been the same since this happened. It's gotten a lot of publicity. But apparently a kindergarten teacher led a discussion in the classroom on transgenderism. And that discussion included a gender reveal. Now, I've heard of gender reveals for when you find out what the gender is of your baby in the womb. One of my kids is going to probably have one of those soon. Let us know if she's carrying a girl or a boy. But this is different. This is in the classroom, and a little boy who is transitioning to a little girl will finally reveal it to his classmates. This is kindergartners. Todd Starn says parents were furious because they were not informed in advance and were not given the chance to opt out their 5-year-olds from the classroom transgender activity. But school teachers told the moms and dads they were not allowed to opt their kids out. And the state did not require them to notify the parents. I think most states do require that, but California doesn't. This was the first week of school, and what happened was a first grader came across a classmate on the playground. She had not seen this child since the spring, all summer. She called that student by his given name because she didn't realize a little boy now identified as a girl. So this little first grader sees the classmate, calls him by the name. She knew him last year, and the boy reports it to a teacher. The little girl gets in trouble on the playground, gets called out of class to the principal office. That's really what happened. And a lot of parents are pretty upset. After about an hour, the little girl, they determined that she made an honest mistake and she wasn't punished, but she was traumatized. And so parents are now upset, pulling their kids out of Rockland Academy, which I would also do if I were one of those parents. Let's go back to the phone. Michael is in New Mexico. Hi, Michael. Thanks for calling.
Yes.
What is your comment?
We were allowed to watch The Simpsons as kids, and maybe I just didn't understand it as a kid. But I now have 3 kids of my own, and we don't dare watch The Simpsons because the agenda is homosexuality, transgenderism, things that oppose my point of view as a Christian. We have a local school here where I'm from that caters to the idea that homosexuality is okay, and they have certain groups for those kids in their school.
Yeah, that's really the case across the country in public schools.
And the case with this little girl calling this certain person by the wrong gender, maybe they should have informed the school student body that this person now identifies as something else. That could have been avoided, in my opinion.
Perhaps, but this little girl was 5, and, a 5-year-old, I mean, they don't have a category for all of this, and yet they're expected to. It's just criminal. And really, we had a doctor on the show a few weeks ago from one of the organizations that's trying to make a lot of common sense about this, and she says it's child abuse when you allow a little child of that age to begin gender transition, and then you force everybody else to accept it.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical idea.
Yeah, it is. Well, thanks for your call, Michael. You live in a world of common sense, and watching The Simpsons was entertaining. But now we find out, some of these views, they're pushed from all directions: Hollywood, education, wherever.
Yeah, they've got the wrong collective idea about things. Of course, that's my opinion, which I could be in trouble for at any given time.
I suppose so. Thanks for calling, Michael. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's go now to Georgia and speak with Jan, listening in on GNN. Hi, Jan.
Hi. I'm just wondering, what is the origin of all this transgender stuff, and what is their ultimate goal?
Well, we talked, I don't know if you were listening to our show the first hour, but there's just, coming from the left, there is this attempt to transform the culture, transform and weaken the United States. And I think, deep down the bottom line of this there are people that are confused about their gender. There are those people that battle those things. And that's real. I do believe that's real. But I don't think that the loving thing to do is to cater to that. It's to help them to live in the culture and in the society and not, codify sin in a sense and then punish everybody else for not going along with it. But it does come from, I think there's this attempt to redefine the truth, redefine what's real. And we don't even know what truth is anymore if we live in the world that the left is creating. And so, even to say that you're a male or female now is up for grabs. It's a question. And so, a few years ago, maybe 5-10 years ago, I think most of us would have said it's not possible that we would actually have this as so prominent in our culture and in our laws. And it's happened so fast. It's just happened so fast, hasn't it?
It sure has. It's just demonic.
Yeah, I think that is the root. That's the root of this. And it's just very sad. I really think it's sad when parents go along with it and affirm that kind of thing in their little children. Well,
right,
we resonate. Thanks, Jan. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
All right. Mm-hmm.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to send you to pointofview.net. This is our website that is, it's worked on every day. We've got a great expert here at Point of View who keeps things up to date for you. You can look at back shows and check them out if you've missed something here at Point of View. You can make sure that you can read all the articles that we refer to. We put them up there. And it's a great resource for you. I put a video up this week or today. And that video is something that will help you kind of look at, a summary of the left. And, we always ask questions. We scratch our heads and wonder why some of these things are happening. And there's really a concerted effort for it. I think sometimes we don't go that deep. We go to the symptoms, or we don't go to the causes. So, check out that video there. It's at pointofview.net. Our guest, Kelly Kohlberg, is the one that alerted us to it and provided it for us. And so you can go there and check it out. It's next to her picture and her name. And it's called Formula for Killing America, a guide for Americans. So take a look at that. Again, at pointofview.net, you can also donate to our ministry, which would be greatly appreciated. We don't have corporate sponsors. We have listeners, and the listeners that help us out do a great service to the country because they help broadcast the truth about many of these issues, and it's something you don't get in the mainstream media, certainly, and really not that many outlets go as deep as Point of View does. So I hope that you will help us. You can do it by going to pointofview.net, or you could even give us a call at our caller line, actually our order line, 800-347-5151, and make a donation there. But really the easiest way is to go to pointofview.net. And you can also send us a donation at P.O. Box 30, Dallas, Texas, 75221. I'm just making an appeal right now for that. I mean, we do that more formally during other weeks, but just as your guest host today, I just want to ask you to support this ministry because it's a worthy ministry. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Steve, for producing the show today. Thank you, Shamila, for all your work on the web. And ladies and gentlemen, we hope and pray you'll have a great night. Tomorrow is our Millennial Roundtable. You won't want to miss it.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so